The topic I will introduce today is financial knowledge and financial behaviors of Filipino workers in South Korea. My name is Jang. I'm a policy researcher at Migration Research and Training Center, South Korea. My co-author and my corresponding author are Professors Koo and Kim at Chungnam National University. There are approximately 25,000 low-skilled Filipino workers in South Korea. They are allowed to reside in South Korea up to 9 years and 10 months under the employment permit system, but they are not allowed to sponsor their family members to live in South Korea. Most of them send remittances to their families in the Philippines, and the amount is 248 million US dollar per year. Most of them engage in transnational financial management under the circumstance, and a lot of them hope to launch a business after returning to the Philippines. Previous studies found that migrant workers often have difficulties in accessing and using financial services in receiving countries, experience differences in financial cultures between their countries of origin and destination. They also tend to lack financial knowledge and financial self-efficacy compared to the natives. Therefore, it is argued that financial education is necessary to foster their financial capability. The Philippines, one of the highest remittance receiving countries, is an exemplary country advocating financial education for overseas migrant workers across all phases of migration. Based on this understanding, we attempted to examine the influences of financial knowledge, self-efficacy, attitudes, and education on the financial behaviors of Filipino low-skilled workers in Korea. Data were collected through collaboration between the Philippine Overseas Labor Office at the Philippine Embassy in Korea and Migration Research and Training Center. The Philippine Overseas Labor Office prepared workshops for Filipino low-skilled workers in Korea, and Migration Research and Training Center prepared survey questionnaire. There were 116 participants for the survey. 36% of the participants had ever taken financial education in the Philippines, and 58% had in Korea. The survey questionnaire was composed of measures of financial behaviors, knowledge, attitudes, self-efficacy, and the needs of financial education by topics. It also included information about demographic characteristics, remittances, and their plans after the return. Characteristics of the respondents is presented in the table. The majority were male in their 20s and 30s. Half of the participants were unmarried, and the mean frequency of sending remittances were 11 times per year. The mean amount of remittances was 13 million Korean won. So the main findings of the surveys are as follows. Financial behaviors were measured by asking how often they engaged in the following activities. The highest score activity was paying bills on time each month, and then the lowest scored activity was contributing to an investment or retirement account. Financial knowledge was measured by World Bank Financial Capability Survey in the Philippines, and we could see that our participants somewhat lacked an understanding about interest and inflation. Financial attitudes and financial self-efficacy were measured by the agreement with the following statement. The participants tended to think that they were disciplined in money management and getting information or advice for making important financial decisions. Regarding financial self-efficacy, they had higher self-efficacy in Korea than in the Philippines. Now I will move on to the result of our models explaining financial behaviors. There were 3 variables which were significant in the models. Being unmarried was negatively associated with financial behaviors, but financial self-efficacy in the Philippines, not in Korea, was positively associated with financial behaviors. Financial attitudes was also positively related to financial behaviors, but financial education was not significant. In fact, when we entered the financial education variable in Model 4, the adjusted R-square decreased. Based on the findings, we could see that our participants' financial behaviors, which were relatively simpler one, were sound, but they tended to have limited contribution to investment and retirement accounts. They were also not well equipped with an understanding of complex financial concepts. In some of these results, it is hard to expect that Filipino migrant workers would be able to accumulate enough amount of assets during their stay in Korea, which could lead to hindering them to achieve long-term financial goals and their goal of migration. Being unmarried was also negatively related to financial behaviors, probably because they have little family obligations in the Philippines. Still, it is important to promote their sound financial behaviors to secure stable financial future. We could also see that financial self-efficacy in the Philippines, not in Korea, influences financial behaviors positively, although financial self-efficacy in Korea was higher. We presume that having higher self-efficacy in Korea is actually a reflection of having fewer opportunities to engage with complicated financial activities or have little information about financial services available to them. Therefore, it is important to support their financial management in Korea, which could be applicable to achieve their long-term financial goals. But as our model showed, it probably could be or could not be by financial education. We found no significant influence of financial education on financial behaviors, which is not surprising because it is often found unclear relationship between financial education and financial behavior, especially among vulnerable population, and when the education program was one-time irregular event. But to shape healthy financial attitudes, it requires time. So we need to provide regular and continuous financial education across the stages. The biggest limitation of our study was that we did not include variables such as remittances, interest in financial education topics, and plan after the return due to the small sample size, although we had all these variables. So we suggest future studies need to examine the influences of remittances on financial behaviors and financial goals, because it is frequently reported that remittances were not well managed by family members in their country of origin, and beyond there is little family communication about how to manage money in their home country and in their destination country. We also suggest future studies need to explore financial behaviors by their future plans, because some want to launch businesses after their return, but others want to get a job in another country. That could affect their financial behavior. The nature of migration labor in Korea is sojourning, not for permanent resettlement or permanent settlement. So it is required to develop financial education programs applicable to financial management in both the Philippines and Korea transnational ways. Thank you.